Hi everyone, it's 7 o'clock in the UK. Welcome wherever you're watching us around the world this morning. Is there perhaps a glimmer of hope for that summer getaway overseas after all? The government's considering allowing British holidaymakers to head off to amber-listed destinations without the need to quarantine on return if they've had both COVID jabs. But that comes as new scientific research suggests that cases are rising rapidly right across England. Plenty then to discuss with the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Jessie Norman, in just a few moments' time. Also,
asthma's been a part of my life from a young age. I've grown to deal with it and see it as part of who I am today.
Knocking asthma for six, we'll be talking to the England cricketer Stuart Broad, who's part of a campaign to raise awareness of the condition amongst children. That's at 9:30. In addition to that, and how the whole of the moon triggered a whole lot of memories. We'll speak to that man, Thomas Leeds, about how this 80s classic brought flashbacks after a teenage head injury robbed him of his memory. That's at around 8:45. It's Thursday, the 17th of June. Cleared for takeoff and landing, ministers consider scrapping the need to quarantine on return from amber list countries if you've had both COVID jabs. But it comes as a new study warns COVID cases are rising rapidly in England, pushing the so-called R rate to more than 1.4. Ending the stalemate in Stormont, Sinn Féin and the DUP reach an agreement to prevent the collapse of power sharing in Northern Ireland. Lessons to be learnt. A survivor of the Manchester Arena bombing speaks out as a report into security arrangements on the night is published.
You think, why wasn't this picked up on? I'm understanding, but I am resentful and angry.
We have liftoff. China launches 3 astronauts into orbit. They'll spend 3 months on the country's new space station.
And for the vast majority of the UK and Ireland, it's going to be fine and sunny. But for most of England, thundery downpours will continue over the next few days. I'll have the full details.
And don't forget hay fever now. There's loads and loads of hay fever. If, like me, you're suffering this morning, my sincerest condolences. We'll hear what the pollen levels are like from NAS later on. Meantime, the government says it's considering plans to relax restrictions on international travel for Britons who've had both coronavirus vaccines. It could mean travellers who've had both jabs would be able to travel to amber list countries without having to self-isolate when they come home. But it comes as a new study from REACT warns COVID cases are rising exponentially in England, with the all-important R rate now at more than 1.4. Let's speak to Charlotte Lomas, who's standing by in the newsroom for us this morning. Hello to you, Charlotte. So potentially we could go on holiday, but also potentially countries won't let us in because of our R rate going up so high.
Yes, I mean, we really do have to manage our expectations here. It's not going to be an ease of restrictions imminently, but we do know that the government officials now are looking into the possibility of trying to allow Britons who have had both of their COVID vaccinations to travel to some popular destinations without having to quarantine when they return. Now, these countries include France, Spain, Italy and the US. But as you mentioned there, you will still have to adhere to the rules set by your destination country, and there will still be a need for tests. So as yet, we just have to monitor the situation, but we do understand that the government is looking into trying to ease up movement between two countries. Now, as you mentioned there, Kay, this does come as a new scientific study is released, the latest one, the REACT study, highly significant from the Imperial College London, which has shown that there's been a rise in the number of infections by 50%. This is mainly driven by the Delta variant, and the bulk of cases has been found in younger children aged between 5 and 12. and also younger adults aged between 18 and 24, these unvaccinated age groups. Now, let me run you through this study in a bit finer detail. This latest REACT study estimates that the R number, the rate of infection growth, is now 1.44. Infections have increased 50%, as I mentioned, between May the 3rd and June the 7th. This coinciding with the rise of the Delta coronavirus variant. And in that period, COVID-19 cases doubled every 11 days, with the highest prevalence being in the northwest, in areas like Manchester and Lancashire. And the data also showed that for those aged over 65, the weakened link between infection rates and hospital admissions was well maintained, also suggesting that the expansion of the vaccine programme to those aged 18 and above should help substantially to reduce the overall growth of the epidemic. So while these numbers are alarming and there is a reason for concern, the authors of this study have also pointed that we are in a very different position now than we were in previous periods of growth, like in the spring and in the autumn, where we can get some comfort in the fact from the vaccination programme there is some immunity and protection.
For now, thank you, Charlotte. Well, let's speak to the Financial Secretary to the Treasury joining us this morning, Jesse Norman. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us this morning,
Hello.
Mr. Norman. Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, Kay. Lovely to see you.
Thank
Morning.
you. Good morning. Are you considering, is the government considering opening holiday routes, amber holiday routes, for those who have had 2 jabs?
Well, the government's keeping all of these fast-moving developments under a fairly close scrutiny, as you might imagine. We're keenly aware of the concerns that people have. There's a lot of desire, of course, to travel, but we have to be prudent, we have to be careful, we have to be cautious, and at the same time, we have to respect the needs of people in other countries which have their own public health issues. So it's a complex picture, but we're trying to do all we can to proceed, as it were, safely and appropriately, given all of the different factors in play.
So it is fair to say the government is considering it?
It's certainly looking at all the options here, and we don't want to get left behind by countries which may be adopting a 2 jabs approach if it can be done safely and if it can be done carefully and securely.
So people watching at home this morning over their breakfast shouldn't write off foreign holidays this summer just yet?
Well, okay, you see the fast-moving situation just as much as we do. We are trying to move cautiously and progressively in the right direction. So I wouldn't write anything off at this point. But then, we are in a situation where the vaccine is not something we control. The virus is not something we control, and we have seen this new Delta variant, and therefore, it would be imprudent to make any carte blanche or, as it were, firm statement now.
If we do, does that not discriminate against under 30s who, by the rollout that we have in the United Kingdom, would not be able to travel because they haven't had both jabs?
Well, I think that's certainly a consideration to be borne in mind. Of course, the under 30s do not have anything like the same vulnerability to the disease that people older do. And as you will be aware, the government is accelerating the rollout of vaccinations as fast as it can. And that's been a very important part of the thinking over the last few days, as you will know, about how long this present period of restriction should last for.
But you do accept that if we do go ahead with 2 vaccinations and you can travel, that does discriminate against the under 30s.
Okay, you're putting us in the world of the remote hypotheticals. Let's see where we get to, and then we can have a conversation about balancing the needs of all the people concerned. And, it may well be that there are approaches we can take that are able to meet the needs of people who aren't fully vaccinated. Let's just wait and see how that evolves.
Except not remote hypotheticals, because when we first started chatting, you were saying that, everything is being considered.
That's true. And, of course, this is one of those things that's being considered. But, I think it would have been a brave person to suggest they could have predicted the course of the virus even a few weeks ago, Kay. So predicting it now is not any easier than it is then. And, of course, we are balancing not just public health issues and economic issues, but also, as you've rightly highlighted, issues of equity and fairness as well.
OK. Let me ask you about people staying at home. Come the 19th of July, what will the government message be about people returning to the office?
Well, of course, that message is going to be one which will have to be announced in due course. But of course, we want a balanced return to work. We want people to maintain safety and security. We have this priceless achievement of a breathing space that vaccinations have given us, and the potential for opening up the economy. The economy is growing, I'm pleased to say, bouncing back very quickly, and we need to be able to safeguard and preserve that.
Would you be happy for your staff to work from home, say, rather than the Treasury?
Well, every company and every, as it were, different organisation is going to want to have different approaches. And there are certainly people who are affected differently by lockdown, and their needs have to be attended to and listened to just as much as anyone else's. You will have seen that there are some institutions which are taking a view that it's really essential that people should be in the office, and it's unfair to younger people, in their judgment, not to do that because of the opportunities to grow and to develop people's skills and to bring them on in the organisation. So again, this is going to be very company or organisation specific, and any guidance the government puts out is going to have to recognise that.
Well, they did, of course, the government did offer some advice back in your manifesto of 2019. We will encourage flexible working and consult on making it the default unless employers have good reason not to. So even before we knew about the virus, you were basically saying people should work from home if they can.
No, I don't think we were saying that at all. But I don't think consulting on flexible working is reaching a view. What it's saying is the patterns of work were evolving before the virus, and as in many cases, the effect of a pandemic, the effect of a national crisis is to accelerate the process of change. And that's certainly happened. And there are many parts of our lives now where people wouldn't go back. I think if you spoke to many GPs, they would say that actually the opportunity to do telemedicine has made their lives able to accommodate many more patients than they had previously contemplated. And there are many other parts of life where it would be lovely to think that working from home gave benefits as well, and productivity benefits to the economy, as well as personal benefits to the individuals as employees.
Well, the government website seems to think that that's the case. Flexible working is a way of working that suits an employee's needs, including working from home.
Well, I don't think that's untrue, is it, Kay? That seems a robust statement of what...
The point I'm trying to clarify for my viewers this morning is, come the 19th of July, do they send the kids off to school and then go up to the spare bedroom to work from home? Or is the government's view that they should probably go into the office?
Well, let us see where we get to on the 19th of July. But I think the government's already flagged, as you have indicated through the manifesto, that it is aware of the shifts in the way in which people work and the desire for flexible working, and in this case, working from home. And of course, as I've said, it will be something that very much varies by organizations, as well as by different kinds of employees and different ages of employees. So again, I don't think there's a particular rule that we could or should lay down at this point.
The former CBI boss, Digby Jones, disagrees. He thinks it's going to drag us back into the 1970s, in his words, instill low ambition, and that we risk becoming a zombie nation. Why is he wrong?
Well, listen, I've known Digby for many years, and he's a man of extremely colourful opinions and occasionally accurate ones. Listen, it's going to be helping many people, and it may not suit other people, and we just need to be aware of that, and organizations need to be flexible enough. And of course, companies want to bring on their employees. Companies have no interest in going backwards, even if what Digby said was true about the nature of employment. I think in many ways, employment is becoming something that's, because it's more flexible, it's more amenable to different people. It allows people to grow in different ways. And if it doesn't, then companies need to think about how they can support people in their own workforces, their own staffs, to develop their own skills and come on forward themselves.
Does the PM still think his health secretary is hopeless?
Look, I think you're referring to some of the revelations yesterday. Kay, I have no idea what the Prime Minister thinks about these matters. And I can tell you what we've been presented with is one side of a snapshot of a conversation that I have no idea if it's true or false, in the middle of the worst economic, social, and public health crisis we've had for 100 years. So, would it be surprising if the odd snapshot portrayed in a certain light, gave a certain view to people. I have no idea. It's again, you're focusing on a very particular element in a much wider picture, which is that we're in this crisis. The Health Secretary has been battling valiantly and in many ways highly effectively through that in order to make that work.
No, I'm just asking you, in your opinion, given that you are a government minister, whether you think the Prime Minister still thinks his Health Secretary is hopeless. I think that's a reasonable question.
It's a perfectly reasonable question. I have no idea. He hasn't consulted me on the matter. I think there's every reason to think that he thinks the Health Secretary...
Does he not give you the impression that he has complete faith in his Health Secretary?
He gives me the impression of thinking that the Health Secretary is doing a very good job under very difficult circumstances, and rightly so. Listen, I've worked with Matt Hancock in the past, and he's a very, very effective and skilled operator. So, those matters speak for themselves.
Let me ask you about the infrastructure bank, which is your area of expertise. What sort of initiative is it? How is it going to work?
So we're setting up a new infrastructure bank. You'll be aware that the government's very focused on two things: levelling up the country, giving as much opportunity, and in particular spreading the benefits of economic growth and infrastructure around the country. But it's also very focused on net zero and reducing levels of carbon use in the economy. So the bank that we've set up, which is announced and is launching today, is an institution that allows us to think in a really strategic way about how to support particular new projects that may be either directly green or infrastructure or both of those things, and to bring those as I say, bring those benefits. It might be carbon capture and storage. It might be support for electric vehicles. It might be green hydrogen. There's a whole host of fascinating new technologies and industries that we need to get behind. And this is a way of crowding in private investment, giving a steer and giving a support to some of those industries of tomorrow.
OK, great to talk to you. Hopefully you won't work from home and you will come into my office next time. It'd be great to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Kind of you, Kay. That's very kind of you. I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, just after 7:30. We'll talk to the former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, about why he voted against extending lockdown measures and his concerns about the UK's relationship with China. 8:05, we'll chat to Labour's chair of the party, Annalise Dodds, about the party's policy review, as well as the rise in COVID cases across the country. After footballer Christian Eriksen's collapse during a Euro 2020 game at the weekend, the NHS is sending out an army of volunteers to teach CPR. NHS England's medical director, Professor Stephen Powis, and paramedic Richard Lee join us at 8:30. Looking at other stories in the meantime for you on the programme this morning, Sinn Féin and the DUP has reached an agreement to prevent the collapse of power sharing in Northern Ireland after ending the stalemate over Irish language laws. The nominations for the country's first and deputy first ministers are expected later on today.
You all know that our preferred option had been for language rights to be legislated through the Assembly and the Executive. It became abundantly clear that that was not happening. The DUP were not doing that. So we've essentially stepped around them and we have broken what I think has been a significant logjam. This has gone on for 15 years.
A survivor of the Manchester arena bombing has said better security at venues has to be one of the lasting legacies of the atrocity. The inquiry into the 2017 terror attack will publish its first report later on today into the security operation at the Ariana Grande concert. Adam Lawler, who was there that night, said he thought authorities had bottled it. Tom Parmenter reports.
This is how it started. Just after 6 p.m, Adam and his good friend Olivia were simply going to a gig. It ended in chaos after the bomb at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. Olivia was one of 22 people killed that night. Adam ended up in hospital, badly injured. And 4 years on, he's listened to the evidence about how security on that night just didn't challenge the bomber.
A lot of people did just bottle it, which, you know, human fear, we can be paralysed by fear. But you know, when that's your profession of security or, you know, policing, you know, response, it should be to hold your bottle and go in there, you think, why wasn't this picked up on? I'm understanding, but I am resentful and angry, like many people.
The inquiry is trying to explain precisely what happened in the city room, the foyer of the arena. A police sergeant had requested that the city room was patrolled at all times that night, but it wasn't. It was the arena's own security teams that first saw Abedi with that big, heavy backpack. And they even had people telling them that he was suspicious. At 8:51, Salman Abedi entered the city room. A security guard watched as Abedi carried his rucksack across the foyer and then up this set of stairs, where he sat down for 20 minutes out of view. It's a CCTV black spot. He then walked back out of the arena, sat down on the Metrolink platform for 16 minutes, and then headed back into the venue. In the lift, he was seen adjusting wires under his jacket. After security guards were then tipped off that he was acting suspiciously, they tried several times to radio it in, but couldn't get through to their control room. Shortly afterwards, Abedi detonated the bomb. There were no police officers in the city room.
None of them wanted this to happen. They messed up, they made human errors, they made massive errors, but at the end of the day, they didn't pull the trigger. He did. And if we're gonna ever really lay blame at what happened, we have to lay it on him.
The report into the security that night is the first in a series that this inquiry will release. The findings could have implications for every UK venue. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Manchester.
Another story is making headlines for you this morning. A new report has found that nurses are leaving the profession because they cannot afford to buy a house, as their pay is too low to keep up with spiralling living costs. The Royal College of Nursing has stepped up calls for the government to award nurses a larger wage increase rather than the planned rise of 1%. Hong Kong police have arrested the editor-in-chief and 4 other executives of pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily on suspicion of violating a controversial national security law imposed by Beijing. The popular tabloid had previously criticised China for tightening control over Hong Kong following months of anti-government protests in 2019. A cross-party committee of MPs is warning that ministers have failed to properly tackle China's creeping capture of organisations established to maintain peace and freedom. The MPs are urging the government to lead efforts to combat what they characterise as moves by autocratic states to undermine organisations such as the International Criminal Court, Interpol and the World Health Organization. The image of farming needs an overhaul to make it more attractive to young people as a career. Researchers from the University of Exeter say potential labour shortages could lead to farms going out of business and moving overseas, putting workers at risk of exploitation. Growing calls for better regulation on thousands of mobile health apps. A report published in the British Medical Journal found that almost 90% were able to access and share people's private information to outside sources. The most common third parties found responsible for data collection within the apps were tech firms, including, Google and Facebook. US President Joe Biden gifted Russian President Vladimir Putin a pair of custom aviator sunglasses during their Geneva summit. The shades, manufactured in Massachusetts, were given to Mr. Putin to mark the end of their talks yesterday. The Kremlin has not said whether and how Mr. Putin may have reciprocated. China has launched a spacecraft carrying 3 astronauts to part of its new space station, the country's first crewed mission in 5 years. The rocket, carrying the Shenzhou 12 capsule, blasted off from the Gobi Desert. The crew is to spend 3 months aboard the country's new space station, 236 miles above the Earth. NBC correspondent Janice Mackey-Freya has the latest from the launch.
This will be China's longest manned space mission yet. For the next 3 months, astronauts will dock with the space station that China is building. They'll do maintenance work, spacewalks, and carry out tests on life support and other systems. This Shenzhou 12 mission is a milestone here. This space station is a matter of national pride. That's especially symbolic ahead of the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party being marked next month. But it's also strategic. China has been frozen out of the International Space Station, largely because of U.S. concerns over the Chinese program's secrecy and connections to the military. China is pouring billions into these space endeavors, and every step of this mission has been covered on live television. There was a farewell ceremony for the astronauts with patriotic songs and flags. This is the third of 11 planned missions to finish construction of the space station, which should be up and running by 2022.
Technonauts apparently are what Chinese astronauts are called. We're going to be talking about that in more detail very shortly indeed. But before that, back down to earth with a bump. The weather, because Naz, my hay fever is horrible this morning. Is it really bad everywhere?
No, there's the answer. It's looking quite wet this morning across many central, southern and eastern parts of England and Wales. Some torrential downpours overnight, but actually elsewhere it's mostly fine and sunny for today.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Lots of sunshine to be had over the next couple of days across northern and western parts of the UK and Ireland. But for the majority of England, it's going to remain rather unsettled. In fact, this morning, across most of England and Wales, for central, southern and eastern areas, that is, it's cloudy. There are spells of rain that are rather heavy as well. But into this afternoon, that rain will clear off into the North Sea and it does become somewhat drier, but quite cloudy still across eastern parts of Wales towards the Midlands, central, southern and eastern parts of England up towards the northeast. Elsewhere, though, some good spells of sunshine right from the word go. A few scattered showers across the north and west. They'll tend to ease later on. And there may still be some showers around central and eastern areas later too.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come on the programme for you in just a few moments. We're going to be talking to the former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, about the extension of the roadmap out of lockdown, as well as the UK's relationship with China.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Her arms, look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Once it takes a hold, it's very, very difficult for these firefighters to get a grip of it and get on top of it and put it out.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We are at a breaking point and we need to work now and fast.
Even though young people are vulnerable to the impact of climate change, young people can also become the change agents that we need to address the climate impact. In my campaign or in my advocacy work, I work largely with young people so that their voices can be heard, so they can also influence decision making from the local level to the national level. And thankfully, we are making progress in that regard.
usaha saya menggarap lahan hutan.
Hi again, everybody. The government says it's considering plans to relax restrictions on international travel for Britons who've had both coronavirus vaccines, meaning travellers who've had 2 jabs might not have to self-isolate on return from amber list countries. Earlier, I spoke to the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Jessie Norman, and asked whether the government was considering vaccine passports.
It's certainly looking at all the options here, and we don't want to get left behind by countries which may be adopting a 2 jabs approach if it can be done safely and if it can be done carefully and securely.
So people watching at home this morning over their breakfast shouldn't write off foreign holidays this summer just yet.
Well, Kay, you know, you see the fast-moving situation just as much as we do. You know, we are trying to move cautiously and progressively in the right direction. So I wouldn't write anything off at this point.
Well, there are reports this morning the government is also considering whether to give millions of staff the default right to work from home unless employers can prove coming into the office is essential. I asked the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Jessie Norman, how long people would be working from home in the future.
The government's already flagged, as you have indicated, through the manifesto, that it is aware of the shifts in the way in which people work and the desire for flexible working, and in this case, working from home. And of course, as I've said, it will be something that very much varies by organizations as well as by different kinds of employees and different ages of employees. So again, I don't think there's a particular rule that we could or should lay down at this point.
Well, our political correspondent Tamara Cohen joining us now. Hello to you, Tamara, working from home at the moment for COVID reasons. But what were you making of what we heard there from the Minister?
Morning, Kay. Indeed, it can make it work, working from home. I think we're seeing the government looking on all fronts at how we live with COVID going forward and how it may change our lives, potentially for the better. First of all, on travel, after a series of government ministers who you've had on your show said, look, go on holiday in the UK, there's some great places to go. Looks like the government are, and I want to be cautious and manage expectations here, looking at trying to get rid of the quarantine requirement for all the amber list. So that would open up France, Spain, Italy, the USA, all the top holiday destinations for British people, for us to go to them later this summer without quarantining on the way back. Now, government sources say they're looking at it. There is a lot more work left to do. And of course, this doesn't account for any requirements that might be imposed by those countries when you get there, but a glimmer of hope for foreign holidays. The next review of the traffic light list is the end of June. If they don't get it done by then, the next one is 3 weeks later, so potentially in time for the summer holidays. But you have to keep your options open, I think, but hope not just for holidays, but people who desperately want to see relatives abroad as well. On home working, it's interesting that actually back in the Conservative election manifesto, as you were putting to Jessie Norman, in 2019, the government promised to consult on making flexible working the default. So perhaps the COVID pandemic has given this the push it needs, since so many companies have now made it possible for people to work from home, perhaps not all the time, but a couple of days a week. Certainly, that's something that's being looked at very closely.
OK, Tamara, thank you. Let's put a couple of those points, along with others, to the former Conservative Party leader and Cabinet Minister, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Hello to you, Sir Ian. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Come to China in a sec. First, what do you think about people working from home more permanently, and also whether they should be able to go on holiday if you've had 2 jabs to an amber list country?
Let me just deal with the working from home at the moment. It was in the government manifesto, so they will be bound anyway to look at this. And COVID, as your commentator said, rightly has added a kind of difference to this process. I have to say I'm a little bit cynical about the idea that people are going to stay at home massively rather than go into the office. And there are 2 reasons for that. First of all, the vast majority of people that are employed in the UK are not employed by these large companies that kind of afford this flexibility, but they're employed by a lot of smaller companies, many small companies that can't afford to have as much of that flexibility as people have. So I suspect this will be coming to terms with individual employees about how things work. And the second bit is actually, after having worked at home, many people that I talk to, my constituents and beyond, having been forced to work at home for long periods, can't wait to get back into the office to meet people, because we are social animals at the end of the day. And whilst here we are on this mechanism, and we do it on Zoom and all these other items, they're very two-dimensional. You can do some factual stuff, but what you can't do is really play off each other as ideas are formed in offices. So there has to be a balance in due course, and I think lots of people want to be in offices, and also city centres rely on people in offices. London, theatres, restaurants, and all the rest, which bring jobs to many other people. So this is not, it can't be a very selfish point. It is a flexibility, yes, but I suspect most people will want to spend the lion's share of their time interacting with their colleagues in the office.
And 2 jabs and you can go on holiday abroad. Does that discriminate against people under 30 who've not had an opportunity to have 2 vaccinations yet?
Well, it depends when they bring something like this in. I'm opposed to a kind of national passports internally. I can understand why to go abroad to holidays, individual countries may wish you to do this, so it's probably necessary. Maybe that just comes to a stamp in your passport, because you'd have to have a passport to travel anyway. But yes, I mean, there are issues around people who for some reason aren't able to and can't have a jab. As you say, I don't know if we go all the way down to all the younger adults. So what about teenagers as well who may not be jabbed? So there are complications to be thought through on this one. But if it's what required, say, to go on a holiday in Italy, that you have to be able to demonstrate you've had 2 jabs or something like that, then if you want to go on holiday in Italy, then you'll have to comply. So the government will have to make that available to people, even if it wasn't mandatory.
Okay. You are co-founder and co-chair of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, thankfully shortened to IPAC. You said that China has a creeping capture of international organisations. What do you mean?
Oh, I think China has carefully thought through the failure of the Soviet Union many years ago, and understood their biggest problem was that their general relations with countries all over the world were frozen, as it were, in absolute ideology. And what Chinese have done is managed to separate from their very strong communist and aggressive and brutal ideology, but externally to present the face of a country interested in doing business and trade. And of course, because they were able to produce cheaper product at the beginning and more technology in a cheaper way, of course, they recognized that the West, the free world, would flood to them to make investments, which is our Achilles heel, and we've done that. And as a result of that, they're able now to, with a very large economy, possibly soon to be the largest in the world, to be able to insert themselves into areas and to change the nature of how governments think. So, for example, Belt and Road isn't just this kind of generous offer to the developing world to provide them with money. Comes with enormous strings attached, support for them in the UN, a style and form of government much more like theirs. They're promoting that the whole time. And also you have to buy Chinese equipment, take Chinese engineers, etc., many of whom never come back because they're left there. All this sort of stuff is the heavy ticket cost of China, but China is deliberately doing this. And the West has been completely asleep at the wheel on this one, and only just beginning to wake up to the fact that this is a very, very big threat to the way we live our lives and to the way that democracies are formed.
Isn't that what diplomacy is all about? Don't we sort of recognise this and then come to terms with how we can work with China so that they don't take over organisations in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in the developed world?
Well, first of all, you've got to openly understand and recognise the distinct threat that China poses to members of the free world. Secondly, you've got to understand that it is, in fact, the free world that has created this incredible Leviathan China economically in a place that the Soviet Union could only ever have looked at and wondered. And it's a result of all of that that it is now rebounding back on us, because that naivety of approach to China's deep-rooted ambitions is where the real problem arises, and the brutality of them at home. When you cross them, they are brutal. So look at India, for example, on the border. They've killed Indian troops in disputes around the border. They've seized the South China Seas against the UN's prediction. They don't care a damn about that. They're trashing the Sino-British agreement in Hong Kong, arresting peaceful democracy campaigners. We just heard about some more this morning that have been raided and arrested. They're threatening Taiwan on a regular basis. You know, and inside I believe they're committing genocide on the Uyghurs, an ethnic group, the Tibetans, now the Inner Mongolians, Christians, Falun Gong. This is not a regime which you can absolutely just do quotes unquote business with. This is a regime that has a very clear and determined view that they will be the dominant country in the world, and more importantly, that their form of government, that of dictatorial communism, is the form that will and should be the choice for every other government around the world. This is a serious threat to liberal democracies, and we've been asleep on the wheel on this one, no question.
Saying Duncan Smith, thank you. Other news, thousands of Irish families whose homes are crumbling after calling on the government for compensation. The bill for fixing the problems caused by defective building materials could run to more than €1.5 billion. From County Donegal, our island correspondent Stephen Murphy reports.
In a remote, beautiful part of Ireland, dream homes have turned to nightmares. Across County Donegal, thousands of families have watched as their homes start to crumble to dust.
Well, as you can see, the cracks are just getting worse every day, and all the cornerstones have started coming away and busting.
It's just crumbling away here.
It's crumbling away, yeah. You can fit your hand in, and then the bits are coming off, and it's just constant.
The problem is mica. Defective building blocks containing high levels of the mineral were used in at least 5,000 homes in Donegal and Mayo during the Celtic Tiger boom years. Now they're disintegrating.
More. Don't know. There we go.
Yeah, that's a bit too big. What does it feel like to live in a house that is, it really is literally just crumbling?
Crumbling away.
Crumbling
I wasn't
away.
expecting that. Yeah, crumbling away.
It must be scary.
It is very scary, especially when it's so quiet at night time. Yeah, it's really
You can
scary.
hear
Yep.
the crumbling.
You can hear the popping.
cracking.
The popping and the banging and some debris falling off.
A short distance away in Buncrana is the home of Claire McDade, originally from London. An engineer has recommended the mica-affected house be demolished.
Demolition, it's a hard thing to face, Stephen. It's a really hard thing to face, and to have to come to terms with the fact that, you know, apart from the financial implications, the stress is just, it's very hard to put into words how stressful it is.
The McDade and McLaughlin families were among thousands who travelled to a protest outside the Irish Parliament. The government now says it will change the scheme.
Everyone agrees we have to protect, people who've at risk of losing their homes. We don't want to see that happen.
But the government can't say today that they will commit to 100%.
No, because you need to get this right.
A working group will now report back to the government at the end of July. As their homes continue to disintegrate, families insist that anything less than 100% compensation will be a betrayal and lead to further protests. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in County Donegal.
Still to come on the breakfast show for you this morning, as the Royal College of Nursing steps up its call for the government to award nurses a larger wage increase. We'll be speaking to a nurse who's been forced to live with her parents. She can't afford to buy a home.
And what we found is that 1 in 5 jobs, nearly 6 million highly skilled people, work in what we call anywhere jobs. These are jobs that can be done fully remotely from home, but they can also be done anywhere in the world, potentially for cheaper. These jobs tend to typically be well paid in the tech sector, finance, professional services. And because they can be done fully remotely, they are vulnerable a bit to outsourcing and offshoring as firms look to cut costs and boost productivity as they bounce back from the pandemic. So the profile of the individual we're looking at is typically younger, relatively well paid, tends to have a degree, be a parent with some dependent children, live in London and Southeast. So these are relatively high skilled individuals working in what would otherwise be good careers, and their jobs can be done fully remotely, but also that makes them vulnerable. And that contrasts to the past where it's typically more routine, manufacturing, clerical jobs that were vulnerable to automation and globalization in the 80s and 90s. What we're seeing now is a trend where remote work is really a possibility, and offshoring is really a possibility for these well-paid white-collar jobs. And I think there are probably 3 specific things where we look for the government to do to make sure that we can capture and keep remote workers here and attract them from abroad. I think the first thing that they can do is looking at the support systems, the infrastructure. So this is not just, it includes connectivity and high-speed broadband, but it's also things like childcare. So remote workers can really work from anywhere in the UK they want to. I think the second thing is rethinking the skills system so that every worker has both the softer interpersonal skills and the digital skills they need to thrive in a tech-based economy. And I think the third thing that we're calling on the government to do is to rethink the social contract so that it's adapting and keeping pace with a more mobile, more flexible labor market in a tech-enabled world.
Police have been firing tear gas and rubber bullets.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Southeast Asia correspondent in Bangkok.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Heavy and perhaps thundery rain will clear England later this morning, leaving it mostly dry this afternoon with sunny spells for much of the UK and Ireland. However, central and eastern areas of England look to stay rather cloudy with a few showers, and some showers will be scattered across northern and western parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland and Scotland. It'll be less warm than yesterday, but still humid for southeastern areas. Pollen will be slightly suppressed today compared to recently, with high levels over England but moderate for Wales, Northern Ireland and central and southern Scotland. The rest of Scotland will have low levels of pollen. Currently, grass pollen is in peak season, fungal spores are at a medium risk and there's lots of weed pollen, mainly nettle.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Royal College of Nursing is warning that staff are leaving the profession because they can't afford to buy a house, as their pay is too low to keep up with spiralling living costs. Let's speak to someone who's caught up in that challenge, and that's nurse practitioner Carmel O'Boyle. Hello to you, Carmel. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Tell us about what the impact of your salary has had on you trying to find accommodation.
Morning. It's been really difficult. So trying to have enough money to kind of live by and to save and to do those things that everybody aspires to do, to buy a house and a car and, I don't know, maybe have a holiday. It's just unrealistic at the moment, and I found it a real challenge.
So what have you had to do? You were living at home with your mother and sister, etc., and your son, and then you tried to move out, but then what happened?
So we're all still in together, all ramped up in this little house, and we are trying to move at the moment. So I'm living out of boxes as we try and kind of get my house completed. But I've had to take a second job in order to kind of find the money for that deposit and enough money to kind of be able to go forward and look at mortgage payments and all the bills that come with that. It's been really difficult, and then finding a suitable house in a shared ownership scheme, which is what I've done, to kind of buy half a share of a house because I'd never be able to get a mortgage for a full share. So it's been difficult.
When you went into nursing, you knew that the salary wouldn't be millionaire standard, didn't you? But you did it anyway. Why was that?
Yeah, I was aware of that, and I don't necessarily need millions of pounds in the bank. I would like enough to live on and to be comfortable, and I think that's fair to say that everybody aspires to that. I love nursing, And I love the challenges it brings and the opportunities to learn and the opportunity to do amazing things with people. And that is the privilege of my job every day. But I should be able to do things that everybody wants to, and I should be paid fairly. So I'm not necessarily asking for, you know, a yacht in the Med or maybe a £200 million yacht. But I certainly would like to be able to buy my own house, excuse me, and live somewhere comfortably with my son.
Yeah, the government announced a 1% pay rise for NHS staff, as you know. Your reaction to that?
It's obscene, that really, isn't it? And it's a political choice whether to fund nursing or not. There is money around for lots of other things, and it's a political choice to kind of dampen down nurses' aspirations to live comfortably. Nobody's asking for anything ridiculous. They just want a fair wage.
You and your friends and colleagues are lifesavers. You don't feel that you get paid satisfactorily for the job that you do on behalf of the nation. What would you say to ministers watching the programme this morning?
After years of cuts, you know, a 1% pay rise is a cut. It's another cut. It's a below inflation wage. It's not something that keeps up with the cost of living. And that's all we want to do. We just want to be paid fairly for what we do. And after this year, when people have been in the most horrendous, frightening circumstances, I think we need to be recognised for the skills and expertise that this profession has. We are a degree educated professional, and we continue to learn every single day to help people. That's what we do, and we need to be recognised for that.
Have you found a property now?
I have, yeah. It's been difficult, but yes.
And when do you move?
Oh, that's something else again. So I'm in the middle of sorting out mortgage and all those kind of conveyancing things that go through that. It is actually really stressful. I hope I never have to do this again.
And your boy, how's he coping?
Okay, so we're kind of packed. We're living out of boxes, but, you know, he's a teenage boy and it's summer, so he lives in vests and shorts. Thank goodness.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Nurses finding it increasingly difficult to find accommodation given the salary that they are earning, according to Carmel O'Boyle, and indeed the Royal College of Nursing as well. She has finally managed to find a property, but she's only been able to buy a half share of that property for her and her son. We wish her all the best when she moves into a new property. Meantime, let's tell you about something that's out of this world. China has launched a spacecraft carrying 3 astronauts to part of its new space station, the country's first crewed mission in 5 years. These are the pictures. Up she goes. China launched the spacecraft carrying those 3 astronauts, or technonauts as they call them, to its new space station, the country's first crewed mission, as I said, in 5 years. The crew are to spend 3 months aboard the country's new space station, 236 miles above the Earth. A short while ago, the rocket carrying the crew was launched from the, I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm going to go with Chiquan Satellite Launch Center. I can say, though, in the Gobi Desert. Going to be up there for at least 3 months. Talking about that in more detail in the next hour. Meantime, quick look at the weather. Here's Naz. Hey, Naz.
Hi, good morning. We are going to see some good spells of sunshine around for today for the vast majority. But across parts of England, there are some rather heavy downpours still this morning, becoming a bit dry there later.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So, some good spells of sunshine over the next couple of days over northern and western parts of the UK and Ireland. But elsewhere, mainly across central, southern and eastern parts of England, it's going to remain rather unsettled. In fact, this morning, there are still some heavy, thundery downpours, particularly down towards parts of the south and east. And it's a rather cloudy start to the day across many parts of England and eastern parts of Wales. Elsewhere, it's a sunny start. It's cool compared to where down towards parts of the southeast, it's a rather muggy morning. And there are some scattered showers across the north and west, but otherwise it's dry. Now, going into this afternoon, and we will eventually see that rain move off into the North Sea. So it does become somewhat drier across many parts of England into this afternoon, but it's going to stay quite cloudy for the east of Wales towards the Midlands, central, southern and eastern parts parts of England all the way out towards the northeast, although eventually it should brighten up later. But where we see the cloud break and there will be some sunny spells, particularly down towards the southeast, there is the risk of some showers. In fact, some showers generally dotted about central and eastern parts of England. Meanwhile, elsewhere, some good spells of sunshine, temperatures around average for the time of year, so feeling fairly warm in any sunny spells. A few scattered showers still across Ireland, Northern Ireland and the north and west of Scotland, but they will be very light in comparison to those heavy downpours across England. Tonight it will be dry and clear to begin with, but yet again by dawn and into tomorrow there will be heavy thundery downpours spreading northwards.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.